The transport shuttle descended through the purple clouds of Theseus 7, carrying 6 beings who believed themselves chosen for greatness. Revan pressed his feathered face against the viewport, watching the military complex grow larger below. The Kulari had spent 3 years qualifying for this program, memorizing every tactical manual approved by the Galactic Coalition. Now he would learn from humanity itself. They say humans won the Proxima conflict with only 2 battalions, Torgan rumbled from across the cabin. The massive Hravik barely fit in his reinforced seat. The Vren sent 20,000 warriors. Humans had 400. Plix's small body trembled with excitement rather than his usual nervousness. I read their equipment specifications. Nothing extraordinary. Standard plasma rifles, basic armor. Yet their success rate exceeds every established species by 40%. Hulwin's crystalline form refracted the cabin lights into rainbow patterns. Logic suggests superior tactical frameworks. We will learn these frameworks. We will return to our worlds as elite officers. The shuttle touched down with barely a vibration. Professional, efficient, exactly what Revan expected from a species that had impressed the Coalition enough to earn training contracts. Within 5 years of first contact, the landing ramp descended. Heat and humidity hit them immediately. Theseus 7 was classified as a moderate world, comfortable for most species. The 6 recruits gathered their minimal luggage and walked toward the reception building. 2 humans waited at the entrance. Both wore simple uniforms without excessive decoration. The woman stood perhaps 1.6 meters tall, her dark skin marked with several thin scars along her jaw and neck. The man was slightly taller, lighter-skinned with gray threading through his short hair. Neither looked particularly impressive by galactic standards. Humans were average height, average build, average strength. "Welcome to Forward Training Complex 7, the woman said. Her voice carried easily across the tarmac without being loud. "I'm Sergeant Okoye. This is Captain Hayes. You've each been selected from thousands of applicants across your homeworlds. That means something." Captain Hayes smiled, and Revan noticed more scars on the man's hands. "You'll be here for 6 months. The first month covers basic integration and physical conditioning. Months 2 through 4 focus on tactical scenarios. The final 2 months are practical application." "Questions?" Torgan raised one thick arm. "Will we learn human close combat techniques? My people value strength. I wish to understand how humans leverage physical confrontation." "You'll learn what works," Okoye said. Something in her tone made Revan's crest feathers stand up, though he couldn't identify why. "Not what looks good in manuals. What actually works when everything goes wrong." Hayes gestured toward the facility. "Let's get you processed and settled. Dinner is at 1800 hours. Tomorrow we start with orientation and assessment." The complex was smaller than Revan expected. Most Coalition training facilities sprawled across kilometers, with separate buildings for each function. This human base felt compact, almost cramped. The barracks were simple: 6 beds, 6 lockers, 1 shared washroom facility adapted for multiple species. "I expected more," Hulwin observed, running crystalline fingers along the plain walls. "Coalition facilities typically demonstrate technological advancement. Humans are new to the Coalition," Plix said, unpacking his equipment with careful precision. "Perhaps they haven't yet received full funding." That evening, they gathered in the mess hall. Other recruits were present, all human, perhaps 30 total. The aliens drew stares, though not hostile ones. Curiosity mostly. A few nods of acknowledgement. The food was simple but adequate. Revan noticed the humans ate quickly, efficiently, without much conversation. Not rude, just focused. Different from the communal meals of his homeworld where eating meant hours of social bonding. After dinner, Captain Hayes assembled all recruits in a briefing room. The humans sat in relaxed postures that somehow still conveyed alertness. The 6 aliens sat in the front row, attentive and proper. Hayes activated a holographic display. "Tomorrow begins with physical assessment. We need baseline data for each species. Different biology means different capabilities. We're not here to make you human. We're here to make you effective." The display showed various exercise equipment and testing stations, standard military evaluation tools. Nothing concerning. Following physical assessment, we'll run basic combat scenarios in virtual simulation. No actual danger, but full sensory immersion. The system will record your decision-making patterns, reaction times, and tactical choices. Hayes looked directly at the 6 aliens. "These scenarios are designed to feel real. Your body will believe you're in actual combat. Some species find this distressing. If you need to stop, just say the word. No shame in recognizing your limits. Sergeant Okoye stepped forward. One more thing. You'll notice our training methods differ from standard coalition doctrine. We do things that might seem wrong or inefficient. Don't assume we're ignorant. Every human instructor in this facility is a combat veteran. We teach what kept us alive, not what sounds good in a classroom. After the briefing, the 6 aliens returned to their barracks. For a while, nobody spoke. Finally, Teswin, the aquatic being who rarely offered opinions, broke the silence. Did anyone else notice their scars? Burns and lacerations, Holwyn confirmed. Consistent with plasma weapons and shrapnel. Both instructors bear evidence of significant combat exposure. That's good, Riven said, settling onto his bunk. We're learning from experienced warriors, not theorists. Torgan made a rumbling sound of agreement. Tomorrow we prove ourselves worthy of this opportunity. But sleep didn't come easily for Rivan. Something about Sergeant Okoye's eyes bothered him. She had looked at them with an expression he couldn't quite identify. Not contempt, not pity. Something else. Something that made his survival instincts whisper warnings he didn't understand. Around midnight, Plix left his bunk and quietly accessed the facility network through his personal terminal. Just browsing, he told himself. Learning the layout, understanding the organization. The network security was surprisingly robust, but Plix was exceptionally skilled with systems. He found standard files, training schedules, equipment manifests, dietary requirements for various species. Then he found a directory marked with human military designations he didn't recognize. Restricted access, but not heavily encrypted. Plix was curious by nature. He opened one file at random. Helmet camera footage began playing. Combat footage. Real combat, not simulation. The timestamp was 3 years old. Location, Proxima Station. Plix watched for 30 seconds before closing the file, his small body shaking. He had seen humans running directly into weapons fire, seen them dragging wounded companions while being shot, heard them screaming, not in fear but in rage and something else, something primal. He deleted his access logs and returned to his bunk. He said nothing to the others. Perhaps the footage was an anomaly. Perhaps those humans had panicked, abandoned training, acted irrationally under stress. But he couldn't stop seeing their faces. They hadn't looked panicked. They had looked determined, purposeful, like creatures who had accepted something terrible and chosen to do it anyway. Plix didn't sleep at all that night. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of species produced warriors who fought like that, wondering what the next 6 months would teach them, wondering if he actually wanted to know. Dawn arrived with a soft chime rather than harsh alarms. Riven appreciated the consideration for species with sensitive hearing. He dressed in the provided training uniform, noting its unusual design. The fabric felt lighter than standard coalition military gear, with more flexibility around joints. Human equipment always seemed to prioritize movement over protection. The physical assessment took place in a vast gymnasium, fitted with equipment for various body types. Riven watched as Torgan demonstrated his species' natural strength, lifting weights that would crush most beings. Plix excelled at agility courses, his small frame darting through obstacles designed for much larger creatures. Holwyn's crystalline structure made certain tests irrelevant, but the logical being performed adequately where applicable. The humans recorded everything without comment or judgment. Just data collection. Professional. By midday, they moved to the simulation chambers. 6 pods stood in a semicircle, each large enough to accommodate different species. The technology was impressive, using neural interface combined with holographic projection to create fully immersive environments. Each pod connects to a shared simulation, Captain Hayes explained. You'll be one team facing a standard defensive scenario. The situation: enemy forces are advancing on your position. You have fortifications, adequate ammunition, and clear fields of fire. Your objective is to hold the position for 30 minutes. Reinforcements will arrive after that window. Sergeant Okoye handed each of them a neural interface band. These will make your brain believe the simulation is real. You'll feel pain if you're hit, though the system limits it to discomfort rather than actual harm. You'll feel fatigue, stress, fear, all the sensory input of real combat without permanent damage. How often do participants fail to complete the scenario? Holwyn asked. Most complete it, Hayes said. Whether they do it well is another question. Remember, this is assessment. We're watching how you think under pressure, not judging your performance. There's no passing or failing today. The 6 aliens entered their pods. Riven felt the neural band activate, a slight tingling across his scalp. The world shifted. He stood on rocky ground under a red sky. His hands held a plasma rifle, the weight and balance perfect. He could smell something like sulfur in the air. Feel heat radiating from the rocks. His team materialized around him, each alien recruit now armed and armored. The fortifications were exactly as described. Waist-high barriers, good sightlines, elevated position. Below them, perhaps 200 meters away, hostile forces gathered. The enemy appeared as generic bipedal forms, standard simulation enemies. Riven counted approximately 60 targets. Defensive positions, he said, taking command naturally. His tactical training immediately categorized the terrain. Torgan, take the left flank. Your strength will hold that position even under sustained fire. Plix, center position with the best view of the approach. Call out enemy movements. Holwyn, right flank. Calculate firing solutions for maximum efficiency. The team deployed exactly as trained. Overlapping fields of fire. Proper spacing to prevent a single explosive from taking out multiple defenders. Designated fallback positions if the line was breached. The enemy advanced. Riven's training took over. Wait for optimal range. Controlled bursts. Conserve ammunition. The plasma rifle kicked against his shoulder and he watched targets fall. His team performed well. Disciplined, coordinated. 15 minutes passed. They had eliminated perhaps 30 enemies with minimal ammunition expenditure. No injuries. Perfect execution of defensive doctrine. Then the simulation changed. A door opened in the air and 3 humans materialized beside them. Sergeant Okoye, Captain Hayes, and another human soldier Rivan didn't recognize. Good positioning, Hayes said, crouching behind the barrier and scanning the battlefield. Solid fundamentals. Now watch. Before Riven could ask what they were watching, all 3 humans vaulted over the fortifications and charged directly down the hill toward the enemy. What are they doing? Plix shrieked. They abandoned the defensive position. Riven watched in horror as the humans split up, each taking a different angle. They weren't retreating. They weren't flanking properly. They were just running straight at the enemy, firing as they moved. Okoye hit the ground, rolled behind a rock, and immediately popped up to fire. Not from cover, but beside it, exposing herself to draw attention. 3 enemies focused on her position. Hayes used that distraction to sprint to a different angle, coming at the enemies from their side. The 3rd human did something completely insane. He charged directly into the enemy formation, fired until his weapon overheated, then used the rifle as a club. Riven watched the man take multiple hits, his health indicator dropping to dangerous levels, but he kept fighting, kept moving. Created chaos in the enemy ranks. They're going to die, Holwyn stated, crystalline voice somehow conveying shock. This violates every principle of defensive warfare. But they didn't die. Hayes threw something that looked like an explosive charge, not at the enemy, but at the ground between 2 groups of them. The blast didn't kill anyone, but created a smoke cloud. Okoye used that cover to reposition again, now firing from a completely different angle. The enemy forces didn't know where to shoot. They had been advancing on a fortified position with clear targets. Now they faced attacks from multiple unexpected directions, with humans appearing and disappearing through smoke and terrain. The 3rd human finally fell, his health indicator hitting 0. But by then the enemy formation had collapsed into confused groups. Hayes and Okoye fell back, not to the fortifications but to different positions entirely, drawing the enemy away from the original defensive line. The remaining enemies tried to pursue them and expose themselves to fire from Riven's team above. The scenario ended. Mission success. 30 minutes survived. But the cost made Riven's feathers stand up. The simulation faded. The 6 aliens emerged from their pods, all of them visibly shaken. The humans stood waiting, looking completely calm despite having just demonstrated tactical insanity. You sacrificed optimal defensive positions, Rivan said, struggling to keep his voice steady. The 3rd soldier died unnecessarily. You took wounds that could have been avoided. You wasted ammunition on suppressive fire instead of aimed shots. You violated 17 different protocols for defensive operations. 18, actually, Hayes said. We also split the team without establishing proper communication channels. Torgan's massive frame somehow looked smaller. Why would you teach us to fight incorrectly? Sergeant Okoye pulled up the tactical display, showing the battle from multiple angles. You held the position. Performed exactly as trained. In a real battle, you would have survived. Probably. The enemy would have eventually overwhelmed you through numerical superiority, but reinforcements would likely arrive in time. She changed the display to show casualty projections. Your approach. Estimated 15% casualties, acceptable ammunition expenditure, high probability of success. Textbook defensive operation. Then she showed their approach. Our method, 33% casualty rate. Terrible by any standard military assessment. We lost one soldier, and the other two took significant damage. Then why do it? Plix asked, his small voice barely audible. Hayes leaned against one of the simulation pods. Because we didn't just survive. We won. The enemy formation broke. Their advance stopped. Their morale shattered. Your defensive position would have held, but they would have regrouped and tried again. Our assault made them afraid. Fear isn't a tactical advantage, Holwyn said. Fear is an emotional response. Professionals overcome fear through training. Most professionals overcome fear, Okoye agreed. But they don't overcome the fear of facing someone who's not afraid of them. When you see someone charge directly at you, taking hits and not stopping, something breaks in your brain. Doesn't matter how well trained you are. The survival instinct screams that you're facing something wrong. Riven tried to process this. His entire education had emphasized calculated risk, minimized casualties, logical decision-making under pressure. What the humans demonstrated was none of those things. You fight like you have nothing to lose, he said quietly. Hayes and Okoye exchanged a glance. Something passed between them. Some shared understanding that excluded everyone else in the room. We fight like we have everything to lose, Hayes finally said. Every single person on our team matters. Losing any of them is unacceptable. So we don't wait behind walls hoping our defenses hold. We take the fight to the enemy, make them react to us, force them into mistakes. That's backwards, Holwyn insisted. Defensive positions minimize risk. Aggressive action maximizes casualties. On paper, yes, Okoye said. But battles aren't fought on paper. They're fought by beings with emotions, instincts, breaking points. Every species in the coalition fights to survive. You set up perfect defenses because you want to go home alive. That's logical. That's sane. She paused and Riven saw something dark flicker in her eyes. We fight like we're already dead. Like survival is secondary to winning. That changes everything about how the enemy perceives us. The 6 aliens stood in silence. Teswin's aquatic breathing apparatus made soft, bubbling sounds. Torgan's heavy footfall shifted his weight uncomfortably. Plix was trembling again, but not with excitement this time. Tomorrow, Captain Hayes said, we'll run the scenario again. But this time, you'll be defending against a human assault team. I want you to experience what the enemy felt today. Then we'll talk about why our methods work. That evening, the 6 aliens gathered in their barracks after dinner. Nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, Riven broke the silence. They're insane. Tactically irrational, Holwyn confirmed. But they won, Torgun rumbled. They won faster and more completely than our defensive position would have. Plix had his terminal out again, accessing training materials. I'm reviewing human military history. Every battle. Every conflict. I need to understand if today was an exception or a pattern. It's a pattern, Teswin said quietly. The aquatic being rarely spoke, but when he did, others listened. I read the public reports before coming here. Humans win battles they shouldn't win, take objectives that should be impossible, survive situations that kill other species. The coalition thinks it's because humans are better trained. I don't think that's why anymore. Riven settled onto his bunk, exhausted despite the simulation being mental rather than physical. Tomorrow they would face human assault tactics. Tomorrow they would be the ones defending against an enemy that charged directly into fire without fear. He tried to sleep, tried to convince himself that this was just different methodology, unconventional but learnable. But he kept seeing that third human in the simulation, taking hit after hit, health dropping to critical levels, still fighting, still creating chaos, still forcing the enemy to react, still believing that his death was worth disrupting enemy formations. What kind of species thought that way? What kind of world created warriors who calculated their own lives as acceptable tactical sacrifices? Riven didn't want to know the answer. But he had 6 months to learn it whether he wanted to or not. 2 weeks had passed since the first simulation. 2 weeks of exercises that made less sense the more Rivan learned. The humans didn't just teach unconventional tactics. They taught controlled chaos. They taught aggression as a default response. They taught something that went beyond military doctrine into pure psychological warfare. Today marked the first live fire exercise. The weapons were powered down to 30% capacity. Still painful. Still dangerous enough to cause temporary incapacitation. Real enough to matter. The exercise parameters seemed simple. A hostage rescue scenario, one simulated captive held in a fortified building. 2 teams competing. First team to extract the hostage wins. 30-minute time limit. The 6 aliens formed one team. 6 human trainees formed the opposing team. Both groups had studied the building layout. Both had planned approaches. Riven had designed their strategy personally. A 3-pronged approach using Torgun's strength for breaching, Plix's technical skills for disabling security systems, and coordinated covering fire from the others. It was perfect. Every contingency accounted for. Every timing window calculated. They assembled at the starting point. The human team waited 50 meters away. Riven recognized none of them. Just trainees like the aliens. Young humans probably on their first training cycle. Sergeant Okoye stood between the 2 teams. Rules are simple. Reduce power weapons. Hits register on your suits. 3 hits and you're eliminated. Medic standing by for actual injuries. The hostage is a training dummy. First team to get the dummy outside the building wins. Questions? Nobody had questions. Both teams understood the objective. Begin, Okoye said and stepped back. Riven's team moved immediately. Plix sprinted toward the building's eastern access panel. Torgun took point, heavy shield deployed. The others formed a protective formation around Plix. Textbook execution. They reached the building without resistance. That should have been the first warning. Plix's nimble fingers worked the access panel. Security systems began shutting down exactly as planned. Torgun positioned himself at the main entrance, ready to breach. Riven felt a surge of satisfaction. They were winning. Executing flawlessly. The building's windows shattered outward. Not from explosions. The humans had simply smashed them from inside. They're already in the building, Holwyn said, crystalline voice somehow conveying disbelief. How did they enter? We've been monitoring all access points. The answer came seconds later when Rivan spotted scorch marks on the building's western wall. The humans had blown their own entrance. Not through a door or window. Through solid wall. Wasted an explosive charge to create an opening that wasn't part of the structure. That's not standard entry procedure, Plix squeaked. Gunfire erupted from the broken windows, not aimed at the aliens. Aimed in random directions. Suppressive fire. Making noise. Creating chaos. Torgun moved toward the entrance. The door exploded outward, triggered charges blowing it off its hinges. Torgun's shields absorbed most of the blast, but the big alien stumbled backward. A human emerged through the smoke. Female, maybe 20 standard years old. She wasn't firing. She was yelling, screaming something wordless and aggressive. She charged directly at Torgun, weapon held low. Torgun tried to bring his own rifle to bear. The human slid under his shield, tagged him twice in the legs, rolled past him and tagged Rivan once in the chest before anyone could react. Contact front. Riven shouted, trying to track the human. But she was already gone, disappearing back into the building through a window they hadn't even known was breached. More humans poured out. 3 of them. They didn't take cover. Didn't establish firing positions. They just ran at the alien team, shooting while moving, making themselves difficult targets through sheer aggression and speed. Holwyn managed to hit one human 3 times, eliminating him from the exercise. But the eliminated human didn't stop. He kept charging, using his body as a moving obstacle, forcing the aliens to maneuver around him. That's not legal, Plix protested. He's eliminated. He should withdraw. Sergeant Okoye's voice came through their comm system. There's no rule requiring immediate withdrawal. He's not firing. He's just inconvenient. The building's roof erupted in smoke. 2 more humans appeared, rappelling down the exterior wall. They weren't part of an organized plan. They were just attacking from another angle, adding more chaos to an already confused situation. Rivan tried to reorganize his team, tried to establish proper defensive positions, but the humans never stayed still long enough to target effectively. They popped up, fired, disappeared, used noise and movement and aggression to completely disrupt the aliens' coordinated approach. Then something worse happened. One human appeared in a third-floor window holding the hostage dummy. He looked directly at Revan's team and smiled. Then he threw the dummy out the window. Another human on the ground caught it, started running, not toward any extraction point. Just running, carrying the dummy, drawing all attention. The aliens pursued. Finally, a clear target. They could end this. The human carrying the dummy suddenly reversed direction, threw the dummy to another human who had circled behind the aliens. That human ran for exactly 4 seconds before throwing the dummy to yet another human. They were playing catch, with the hostage, while taking fire, treating a military exercise like a game. Riven felt something break inside his tactical mind. This wasn't warfare. This wasn't professional military operation. This was madness organized into something resembling strategy. Teswin managed to hit the human carrying the dummy. Once, twice. The third shot missed as the human dove rolled and came up still clutching the dummy. "I have him," Teswin said, lining up the final shot. The human threw the dummy straight up in the air, impossibly high. While it was airborne, he deliberately stood up, letting Teswin land the third hit. Eliminated. But the dummy came back down. Another human, the one who had charged Torgun earlier, caught it and sprinted toward the extraction zone. "Time," Sergeant Okoye called. "Human team wins." Hostage extracted with 14 minutes to spare. The exercise ended. The aliens stood in various positions around the building, breathing hard, minds reeling. The humans gathered around their teammate who had made the final extraction, celebrating like they had won an actual battle instead of a training scenario. Captain Hayes approached the alien team. "Debrief in 10 minutes. Get some water. Catch your breath." The debriefing room felt smaller than before. The 6 aliens sat together, none of them making eye contact. The human trainee team sat on the opposite side, still energized from their victory. Hayes brought up the tactical display. "Let's analyze what happened. Alien team, your approach was technically perfect. Coordinated entry, security systems disabled, proper formation, everything by manual." He rotated the display. "Human team, your approach was chaotic. Improvised breach. No clear chain of command, multiple individuals making independent decisions. Wasted ammunition on suppressive fire, deliberately took risks that could have resulted in mission failure." Rivan waited for the condemnation, waited for Hayes to explain why the humans had performed poorly despite winning. "The alien team fought to complete the objective," Hayes said. "The human team fought to stop you. Different priorities, different mindsets." "We both had the same objective," Halwyn protested. "Extract the hostage." Okoye stepped forward. "No, you had an objective. They had a mission to stop you from achieving your objective. Subtle difference. Massive tactical implications." She pointed at the recording of the human throwing the dummy out the window. "That moment. What were you thinking?" "That he was insane," Rivan admitted. "The hostage could have been damaged. It was a dummy," one of the human trainees said. His voice was casual, almost amused. "In a real scenario, we would have evaluated the risk. But in training, we knew we could improvise, so we did. Made you react to us instead of executing your plan." "You treated it like a game," Plick said softly. The same human shrugged. "Everything's a game until someone actually dies. Might as well have fun with it." Revan saw Sergeant Okoye's expression tighten, saw Captain Hayes give the young human a look that conveyed disapproval without words. "Fun is the wrong word," Hayes said carefully. "But adaptability is crucial. The enemy doesn't follow your plan. The situation never matches your expectations. Rigid tactics break under real pressure." He dismissed the human trainees and waited until only the 6 aliens and 2 instructors remained. "You're angry," Hayes observed. "You feel cheated. Like the humans didn't fight fair." "You didn't," Torgun rumbled. "You violated proper assault protocols. You took unnecessary risks. You sacrificed tactical efficiency for aggressive action." "Yes," Okoye said simply. "We did all of that. And we won. Now ask yourselves why that bothers you so much." The question hung in the air. Riven felt the answer forming in his mind, ugly and uncomfortable. "Because it shouldn't work," he said finally. "Your methods should fail. Should result in higher casualties, lower success rates, mission failures. But they don't, they work. And we don't understand why." Hayes nodded slowly. "That's the real lesson today. You're trying to learn human tactics, but human tactics are built on human psychology. on human instincts, on the way humans process fear and danger in survival. He pulled up another display. This one showed casualty statistics from actual human military engagements over the past 3 years since joining the coalition. Human units have 60% higher casualty rates than equivalent coalition forces. We lose more soldiers per engagement than any other species. By any logical measure, we're the worst military force in the galaxy. The statistics supported his statement. Humans died more often than any other species in comparable situations. But look at mission success rates, Okoye added. The numbers shifted. Human mission success rates exceeded every other coalition species by 40%. They died more often. But they won more often. How is that possible? Hallwin asked. Because we accept casualties, Hayes said quietly. Every other species fights to minimize losses. You plan around keeping everyone alive. That's logical. That's sane. But it's also predictable. Enemies can counter it because they understand that priority. Okoye's voice was harder. We plan around completing the mission, not around everyone surviving. If losing one soldier means saving 5 others, we lose that soldier. If taking heavy casualties means winning decisively instead of barely surviving, we take the casualties. Riven felt cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. You calculate your own lives as expendable. No, Hayes said firmly. We calculate our own lives as valuable enough to spend on things that matter. There's a difference. The 6 aliens left the debriefing in silence. Nobody spoke during dinner. Nobody wanted to discuss what they had learned. That night, Riven found Hallwin in the common area, crystalline form refracting the dim lighting into scattered colors. I'm withdrawing from the program, Hallwin said without preamble. I submitted the request an hour ago. Why? Because I understand now, the crystalline being said. This isn't military training. This is trauma conditioning. Humans don't teach tactics. They teach acceptable self-destruction. My species cannot learn that. Our biology, our psychology, our entire evolutionary path rejects the concept of self-sacrifice for abstract objectives. Hallwin turned to face Riven directly. They're broken. Every human in this facility is psychologically damaged in identical ways. They've normalized trauma, systematized it, turned it into doctrine. I cannot and will not learn to break myself the way they're broken. The crystalline being left without waiting for response. Riven sat alone in the common area, thinking about everything he had witnessed over the past 2 weeks. Humans didn't fight like other species, didn't think like other species, didn't value survival the same way. And somehow, impossibly, that made them more effective than beings who fought rationally. Riven didn't sleep again that night. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the remaining 5 aliens would make it through 6 months, wondering if they should even try. Wondering what kind of galaxy needed warriors so broken, they considered dying for objectives a normal part of military planning. Week 4 began with 5 aliens instead of 6. Hallwin's departure left an empty bunk that nobody wanted to acknowledge. The remaining recruits moved through their training with mechanical precision, completing each exercise without enthusiasm or complaint. They had stopped trying to understand. Now they simply endured. Late one evening, after another exhausting day of combat drills that made no logical sense, Rivan found himself unable to sleep yet again. He left the barracks and wandered the facility corridors. Most sections were empty at this hour, just automated systems maintaining comfortable environment levels. He found Plix in the data center, surrounded by holographic displays showing text, images, and videos. The small Centauri didn't notice Riven's approach, too focused on whatever research consumed his attention. You're still looking for answers, Riven said softly. Plix jumped, startled, then deflated. I thought understanding their history would help. Understanding Earth, understanding how humans evolved, but it just makes everything worse. Rivan moved closer, looking at the displays. Files about Earth's geological history, extinction events, climate catastrophes, mass die-offs that eliminated most life multiple times over millions of years. Earth tried to kill them, Plix whispered. Not once, repeatedly. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, diseases that should have eliminated their entire species. And they survived, not because they were strong, because they were stubborn. Another display showed predator-prey ratios. Earth had more predator species than most worlds. Larger predators, more efficient hunters. Humans evolved as prey animals who learned to hunt back. Look at their biology, Plix continued, pulling up medical scans. Their pain management system is redundant. 3 separate mechanisms for controlling pain response. Why would evolution create that? Because pain that stops you from functioning means death, Riven realized. On most worlds, pain warns you to stop. On Earth, stopping means something eats you. Plix nodded frantically. Their stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. They have chemical systems that literally override survival instincts. They can force their bodies to keep functioning past normal limits. It's built into their DNA. He pulled up another file. Coalition medical assessments from humanity's first contact. The doctors who examined humans flagged them as dangerous. Not because of weapons or technology, because of psychology. Human emotional bonding triggers the same brain regions as survival instincts. They literally can't separate my group from my survival. Losing someone from their group registers as personal death threat. Riven settled onto a chair designed for beings much larger than himself. You're saying their whole species is wired incorrectly? Not incorrectly, Plix corrected. Optimized for a world that constantly tried to kill them. They bond intensely because isolated individuals died. They ignore pain because stopping to heal meant predators found you. They take insane risks because calculated caution wasn't enough to survive Earth. He closed the displays, small body shaking. We came here thinking humans were successful soldiers despite being from a dangerous world. We were completely backwards. They're successful because Earth made them this way. Torgon joined them sometime later. The massive Hravik moved quietly for his size, though the floor still vibrated slightly under his weight. He carried a data tablet showing different research. I've been studying human warfare, Torgon said, sitting heavily. Conflicts before they joined the coalition, wars among themselves. He activated the tablet, showing statistics that made Riven's crest feathers flatten against his skull. They fought each other for thousands of years. Killed billions of their own species. Developed weapons specifically designed to kill humans efficiently. The numbers were staggering. Wars that lasted decades. Conflicts that consumed entire continents. Weapons that could eliminate millions in seconds. My people value strength, Torgon continued, his rumbling voice quieter than usual. We have ritual combat, tests of power, but we don't try to exterminate each other. Humans spent most of their history perfecting murder. And then they stopped, Teswin said from the doorway. The aquatic being's breathing apparatus bubbled softly as he entered. Mostly. They still have conflicts, but nothing like their historical wars. I wanted to understand why. He didn't have data displays, just observations. I've been watching the human trainees, watching how they interact. They argue constantly, disagree about tactics, about priorities, about everything, but they never actually hurt each other. Training accidents happen, Rivan pointed out. Not with humans, Teswin said. I checked medical records. Human trainees haven't seriously injured each other in 3 years of operation at this facility. They're aggressive in exercises, but they pull back before causing real harm. It's instinctive. They've learned to redirect violence away from their own group. He moved closer to the others. Earth taught them to kill. Thousands of years of war taught them to kill efficiently. But something changed. They learned to redirect that capability outward, to protect instead of destroy. That doesn't make them less dangerous, Riven said. If anything, it makes them more frightening. Controlled violence is worse than chaotic violence. I think it makes them sad, Teswin said quietly. The other 3 aliens stared at him. Sadness wasn't a word anyone associated with human warriors. Sergeant Okoye, Teswin continued. Have you noticed her eyes? She looks at us like we're fragile. Like she's afraid we'll break. Captain Hayes does it too. They don't see trainees when they look at us. They see children playing at war. Riven hadn't considered that interpretation, but now he couldn't unsee it. The way Okoye's expression softened when aliens struggled with exercises. The way Hayes always asked if they wanted to stop scenarios before trauma accumulated. They don't want us to become like them, Rivan realized. Plix pulled up another file. This one was marked with coalition medical designations. I accessed their psychological evaluations. The ones they submitted when joining the coalition. Every human evaluated showed markers for PTSD, every single one. The coalition doctors noted it but approved them anyway because humans claimed it was normal. The file contained interviews with human soldiers, brief snapshots of their mental states. One human described nightmares every night for 3 years after a battle. Still performed duties perfectly. Still rated combat effective. Another described panic attacks triggered by certain sounds. Had learned to function through them. Considered it manageable. A third casually mentioned losing 30 friends in one engagement. Spoke about it the way other beings discussed bad weather. They're all damaged, Plix whispered. The entire species is carrying trauma they consider normal. And they're teaching us to be like them, Torgan said. The 4 aliens sat in silence, processing information none of them wanted to believe. Somewhere in the facility, human trainees slept peacefully, unbothered by the psychological weight they carried. Or maybe they didn't sleep. Maybe they had nightmares too and just never mentioned it. I need to talk to Sergeant Okoye, Revan decided. Ask direct questions. Get real answers instead of tactical explanations. The next afternoon, Revan requested a private meeting. To his surprise, Okoye agreed immediately. They met in a small briefing room, just the two of them. You want to know why we fight the way we do, Okoye said before Revan could speak. You've been researching Earth, researching human psychology, trying to understand what's wrong with us. Revan's feathers flattened slightly. Is it that obvious? You're the 4th species to go through this program, Okoye said, leaning back in her chair. They all reach the same point, the moment when training stops making sense and starts looking like organized insanity. She pulled up a holographic display, not tactical data. Personal photographs, humans in military uniforms smiling at the camera, 40 individuals arranged in neat rows. My unit. Before Proxima incursion. Okoye's voice remained steady, but something in her eyes changed. We were assigned to protect a civilian evacuation. Standard defensive operation. Hold the line while transports loaded refugees. Another image. Same location, same unit. But the group was smaller now. Maybe a dozen humans, all showing injuries, all looking exhausted. 4 hours into the engagement, we realized the enemy wasn't trying to break our line. They were trying to get around it. Get to the transports. Kill the civilians. Okoye zoomed in on one face. Young human female, couldn't be more than 20 years old. Private Wells, fresh out of basic training. Smart kid, fast reflexes. She figured out the enemy pattern before anyone else. A third image showed the aftermath. Bodies. Destroyed equipment. Scorch marks everywhere. Wells told me the enemy was flanking. Told me someone needed to stop them. I said we'd coordinate a response. Follow protocol. She looked at me and said, There's no time for protocol, Sergeant. Okoye closed the images. She took 6 soldiers with her. 7 total. They went after an enemy force of 200. Didn't ask permission. Didn't wait for proper support. Just went. That's suicide, Revan said. Yes, Okoye agreed. 3 of them died in the first minute. Wells lasted almost 4 minutes. Long enough to disrupt the enemy advance. Long enough for us to reposition. Long enough for the transports to finish loading and escape. She looked directly at Revan. 40 civilians on those transports. Adults and children. Multiple species. All of them lived because 7 humans decided their lives were worth trading. You could have stopped Wells, Revan said. Ordered her to maintain position. I could have, Okoye said softly. I didn't because she was right. There wasn't time for protocol. And someone had to go. She volunteered, so I let her. I let 6 others follow her. I sent them to die. The silence stretched between them. Does it hurt? Revan finally asked. Losing them? Every day, Okoye said. Every single day for 3 years. I see their faces. Hear their voices. Wonder if there was another way. A better way. A way that didn't cost 7 lives. But you'd do it again. Yes, she said immediately. Because 40 people lived. Because the alternative was watching civilians die while we followed proper procedure. Because sometimes the only choice is who dies, not whether anyone dies. Revan felt something cold settling in his chest. That's what you're teaching us. How to make those choices. No, Okoye said firmly. We're teaching you how humans make those choices. Whether you should make them the same way is a different question. Your species didn't evolve on Earth. You don't have our damage, our trauma, our broken survival instincts that prioritize the group over the individual. She stood up, moved to the window overlooking the training grounds. Captain Hayes and I argued about this program. He thought it was wrong to expose other species to human combat doctrine, thought it would damage them the way Earth damaged us. Why did you disagree? Because the galaxy needs someone who fights like us, Okoye said. Not for conquest. Not for glory, but for protection. The Coalition faces threats that don't follow rules. Pirates, rogue factions, species that prey on weaker beings. Against those threats, calculated logic isn't enough. You need warriors who'll trade themselves to protect others. She turned back to Riven. We didn't volunteer to teach because we think everyone should be like us. We volunteered because someone has to do the ugly work. Might as well be the species already broken in the right ways. Riven left the meeting understanding less than before, or perhaps understanding too much. The galaxy needed broken warriors, needed beings damaged enough to make impossible choices. Earth had created those beings through millions of years of trial and extinction and survival against impossible odds. That night he shared everything with the other 3 remaining aliens. They sat together in their barracks, processing information that fundamentally changed their perception of humanity. We can't learn this, Torgan said finally. Not really. We can study their tactics, practice their maneuvers. But we can't think like them because we didn't evolve like them. Maybe that's the real lesson, Teswin suggested. Understanding that humans are unique, that their approach works for them but might not work for us, Plix was crying, small droplets forming in his large eyes. They're so sad, all of them, carrying so much pain. And they smile. They laugh. They act like everything is normal. Riven thought about Sergeant Okoye, about Private Wells running toward certain death, about 40 civilians who lived because 7 humans couldn't stand to watch them die. I think I understand now why Hallwyn left, he said softly. Not because the training was too hard, because understanding humans is too hard, because seeing what they carry and knowing we can't help them carry it is too hard. The 4 aliens remained in the program, but something had changed. They stopped trying to become human warriors, started trying to become warriors who understood humans. Different goals, different outcomes. And through it all, the human instructors watched with sad, knowing eyes. Tweak 8 arrived with unexpected announcement. Captain Hayes assembled all trainees in the main briefing hall, his expression more serious than usual. The 4 remaining alien recruits sat together in their designated section, surrounded by 30 human trainees who somehow sensed something significant was coming. Final phase begins tomorrow, Hayes said without preamble. Combat observation program. Some of you will deploy to active conflict zones as non-combatant observers. Coalition law prohibits you from participating in actual fighting. You're there to watch, to learn, to understand how combat differs from training. Riven felt his crest feathers stand up. Actual combat, real battles. Not simulations or reduced power exercises. Riven felt his crest feathers stand up. Actual combat, real battles. Not simulations or reduced power exercises. The conflict zone is a border system disputed by local factions, Hayes continued. Low-intensity fighting, mostly raids and skirmishes, nothing that should require major engagement. But combat is unpredictable. You'll be assigned to human units operating in the region. Your safety is their responsibility. Sergeant Okoye stepped forward. You can refuse deployment. No consequences. No judgment. Observation phase is voluntary for non-human trainees. We need verbal confirmation from each of you. She looked directly at the 4 aliens. Riven saw concern in her eyes, not fear, just genuine worry for their well-being. Torgan spoke first, his rumbling voice firm. I accept deployment. Teswin's aquatic breathing apparatus bubbled softly. Confirmed. I will observe. Plix was shaking, but his voice remained steady. Yes, I need to see. Everyone looked at Riven. He thought about Hallwyn, who had left rather than continue. Thought about everything they had learned about human psychology and trauma. Thought about Private Wells running toward 200 enemies. I accept, he said quietly. 2 days later, they boarded a coalition transport. The journey to the border system took 6 hours. Raven spent most of that time reviewing briefing materials about the conflict. Local factions fighting over resource rights. Nothing ideological. Just economics and territory. The kind of conflict that normally resolved through negotiation or coalition arbitration, except one faction had started using tactics that violated coalition protocols, attacking civilian targets, taking hostages. Standard rules of engagement didn't work against opponents who ignored those rules. That's why humans were deployed. They specialized in fighting enemies who didn't follow rules. The transport docked with a coalition border station orbiting a barren moon. The station showed signs of recent combat. Scorch marks on hull plating, temporary patches over breaches, the kind of damage that comes from direct assault rather than accidental collisions. Captain Hayes met them at the airlock. Welcome to Forward Station 7. It's been an interesting month. Interesting was clearly an understatement. The station corridors showed more damage. Crew members moved with alert readiness even in supposedly secure areas. This wasn't a peaceful posting. Hayes led them to a briefing room where 4 human squad leaders waited. Each would take 1 alien observer. Riven, you're with Scout Team 3, Hayes said. Torgan, Engineering Squad, Plix, also Engineering. Teswin, Standard Infantry. Your assigned squad leaders will brief you on specific operations. Remember, you observe only. Do not engage. Do not interfere. If fighting starts, you find cover and stay there. The squad leader for Scout Team 3 introduced herself as Lieutenant Park. Young for an officer, maybe 25 standard years. She had the same watchful eyes all human soldiers seem to develop. We run reconnaissance patrols, Park explained as they walked to the Scout Team ready room. Map enemy positions. Identify targets for larger operations. Usually quiet work. But quiet doesn't mean safe. The Scout Team consisted of 5 humans, including Park. All of them greeted Rivan politely but without excessive familiarity. Professional courtesy. They checked their equipment with practiced efficiency, each movement economical and purposeful. Mission brief in 10 minutes, Park said. Standard patrol. Survey 3 potential enemy positions. Avoid contact if possible. If contact is unavoidable, assess and withdraw. The briefing was exactly what Park described. 3 locations. Specific intelligence requirements. Clear rules of engagement. Everything by the manual. The patrol departed 90 minutes later. They used a small shuttle to reach the moon's surface, landing in a crater far from their target locations. The moon had minimal atmosphere. Everyone wore environment suits. Moving across the terrain felt surreal. The scouts moved in spread formation, using terrain for concealment, maintaining communication discipline. Exactly like exercises. Professional, controlled. The first 2 survey points yielded useful data. Enemy positions identified. Numbers estimated. Equipment cataloged. The scouts recorded everything and prepared to move to the 3rd location. That's when the ambush happened. Plasma fire erupted from multiple directions, not from the 3rd survey point. From a completely different location, the enemy had been watching, waiting, setting their own trap. Contact all directions! Park's voice was calm despite the chaos. Break formation, dispersed retreat pattern Delta. The scouts scattered. Riven followed Park, trying to keep up with the humans' rapid movement across broken ground. Plasma bolts superheated the thin atmosphere, leaving glowing trails. One of the scouts took a hit. Riven saw the plasma strike his leg, saw the human fall. The scout's name was Williams. He had made jokes during the shuttle ride. Williams is down. Another scout, Rodriguez, transmitted. Northeast quadrant. Fall back to the shuttle, Park ordered. Williams, can you move? Negative. Williams' voice was tight with pain. Legs gone below the knee. I can't walk. Riven watched what happened next with the kind of clarity that comes from shock. Standard protocol was simple. Wounded soldier who can't move in an ambush situation. Surrounded by hostiles. With no clear path for extraction. The protocol was to order the soldier to defend their position while the team withdraws. Sacrifice 1 to save 5. Logical, practical, survivable for most of the unit. Lieutenant Park didn't follow protocol. Rodriguez Chen established covering fire. We're getting Williams. That's a kill box, Lieutenant, Rodriguez said. They set this trap for exactly this response. I know, Park said. Do it anyway. They did it anyway. Rodriguez and Chen positioned themselves to create suppressing fire. Park and another scout named Anderson sprinted directly toward Williams's position. Riven followed because he didn't know what else to do. The amount of fire converging on their position should have killed everyone. Riven's suit alarms screamed warnings about environmental threats and structural damage. Plasma bolts impacted all around them. Park reached Williams first. She didn't try to carry him. Too heavy in full armor. Instead, she grabbed his suit harness and started dragging. Anderson provided covering fire with one hand while grabbing Williams' other side with his free hand. They pulled Williams across open ground while being shot at from multiple positions. It was insane. It violated every survival instinct. It should have failed. Rodriguez and Chen kept firing, not trying to hit specific targets, just creating enough chaos to make the enemy hesitate. Making them think twice about maintaining firing positions, forcing them to take cover instead of taking clear shots. Somehow, impossibly, they made it back to cover. Riven helped pull Williams behind a rock formation that provided temporary protection. Williams was badly injured. His suit's medical systems worked to stabilize him, but he had lost significant blood. His face was pale, slick with sweat despite the cold. "I'm sorry," Williams said, voice weak. "I walked right into the open. Should have been more careful." "Shut up," Park said, her hands working on his suit's medical systems. "You did fine. Just a bad placement. Could happen to anyone." "You shouldn't have come back for me," Williams continued, clearly in shock. "Protocol says—" "Protocol can file a complaint," Anderson interrupted. "We don't leave people." They called for emergency extraction. A shuttle arrived within 15 minutes, dropping through the thin atmosphere with absolutely no regard for stealth or proper approach procedures. The pilot just dove straight down, landed hard, and opened the bay doors while still under fire. The scouts loaded Williams and retreated. The entire mission, from ambush to extraction, lasted 23 minutes. On the shuttle back to the station, Riven sat next to Williams while a medic worked on his leg. The human was sedated but conscious, staring at the ceiling with unfocused eyes. 40 more seconds, Williams mumbled. "That's all they needed. 40 seconds and the shuttle arrives. They're gone. I'm alone." "They didn't leave you alone," Rivan said softly. "I know," Williams said. "They never do. That's what makes it worse. They should. They should calculate acceptable losses. Should prioritize mission success over individual survival. Should be smart." He turned his head to look at Riven. "But they're not smart. They're human, and humans don't leave each other." Riven thought he understood before, thought the research and interviews and observations had given him insight into human nature. He was wrong. Understanding intellectually was completely different from watching humans run into direct fire to retrieve a wounded teammate. Over the next 2 weeks, similar patterns repeated across all 4 alien observers. Torgan watched combat engineers deliberately collapse a tunnel with themselves inside to prevent enemy forces from using it. Watched them dig their way out over 6 hours, injured and exhausted, refusing to give up. Plix observed a demolitions team hold an exposed position for 40 minutes to buy time for civilian evacuation. 3 engineers wounded. None of them retreated. The civilians all escaped safely. Teswin saw standard infantry refuse evacuation orders when a medical bay was breached. Watched them counterattack into a fortified position because there were wounded inside who couldn't defend themselves. Oh. The aliens documented everything, recorded decisions that made no tactical sense but somehow worked. Watched humans trade their safety for mission success, for civilian protection, for each other's lives. On day 14 of deployment, a major incident occurred. The station came under coordinated assault, not a raid. A full military attack designed to capture or destroy the facility. Multiple enemy ships, ground forces landing in the station's hangar bays. Actual warfare. The 4 aliens were hustled into a secure command bunker with Captain Hayes. Banks of displays showed tactical situations throughout the station. Communication channels carried updates from various defensive positions. Riven watched the displays with growing horror. The station was losing. Enemy forces controlled 3 of 5 hangar bays. Power systems were damaged. Life support compromised in several sections. Coalition forces were being pushed back steadily. Then he started noticing the patterns. Human units didn't retreat when they should. They held positions past the point of logic. Small groups volunteering for counterattacks that had minimal success probability. Individual humans making decisions that prioritize protecting others over their own survival. Station medical is breached, one display showed. Red indicators marked enemy forces entering the medical bay where 40 wounded personnel were located. Multiple species, unable to evacuate. Sergeant Okoye's voice came through the command channel. "Hayes, I'm taking 2nd Platoon to medical." Hayes looked at the tactical display. The route to medical was completely compromised. Enemy forces controlled every access corridor. Going there meant fighting through multiple fortified positions. "That's a kill zone, Sergeant," Hayes said, his voice careful. "You'll take catastrophic casualties." "Probably," Okoye agreed. "But there's wounded in medical. We can't leave them." Hayes was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Riven watched emotions flicker across the captain's face. Concern, calculation, resignation. "I know," Hayes finally said. "Good hunting, Sergeant." Riven watched the tactical display as 30 human soldiers assaulted fortified positions to reach the medical bay. Watched the casualty markers appear. Each red dot represented a human who stopped transmitting, stopped moving, stopped living. 17 dots appeared in the first 4 minutes. Plix was crying again. Torgen's massive body was completely still, frozen in shock. Teswin's breathing apparatus bubbled faster than normal. The humans reached medical bay, held it against overwhelming numbers for 22 minutes until reinforcements arrived. Saved 38 wounded personnel, including 7 aliens from other units. The battle ended 2 hours later. Coalition victory. Station held. Enemy forces retreated. But the cost? 17 human soldiers dead. Another 30 wounded. All from a single platoon's decision to counterattack into impossible odds. When the 4 aliens emerged from the bunker, the station corridors were chaos. Medical teams treating wounded. Engineering crews repairing critical systems. Everyone moving with exhausted determination. They found Sergeant Okoye in the medical bay, badly wounded but refusing treatment until others were stabilized. She saw them and smiled weakly. "Still think we're crazy?" she asked. Riven couldn't answer. His voice didn't work. He just stood there, staring at a human who had led 30 soldiers to save 38 others, lost 17, saved 21, and considered it a successful operation because the wounded lived. The transport back to Thessia 7 was quiet. The 4 aliens sat together, none of them speaking. Around them, human soldiers recovered from the battle, some wounded, all exhausted, yet the humans talked quietly, even laughed occasionally, processing trauma through connection with each other. Rivan couldn't understand how they did that, how they carried so much death and pain and still functioned, still smiled, still made jokes about things that should have broken them. Lieutenant Park sat across from him, her arm in a regeneration sleeve. She had taken plasma burns during the final counterattack, not serious injuries by human standards. She would recover fully within a week. "You're going to withdraw from the program," Park said. "Not a question." "An observation." Riven looked at her. "How did you know?" "Everyone who observes actual human combat reaches the same conclusion eventually," she said. "We're not what other species expect. We don't fight the way military manuals teach. We make decisions that look like suicide from the outside." She adjusted her regeneration sleeve carefully. "You came here thinking humans were successful soldiers. You're leaving knowing we're successful because we're willing to die. Those aren't the same thing. Why do you do it?" Riven asked, finally voicing the question that had haunted him for 2 months. "You know the cost. Know that your methods result in higher casualties. Why not fight smarter? Why not use tactics that keep more of you alive?" Park was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled up a holographic display showing the station medical bay, the 38 wounded personnel who had been saved. Multiple species, different ages, some military, some civilian support staff. "See the Quillari in the 3rd bed?" Park pointed. "That's Scholar Riven, linguistics expert. He was at the station translating recovered enemy communications. Got caught in medical when the attack started. Couldn't fight. Couldn't run. Just waited to die." She zoomed in slightly. "The Hravek next to him is Engineer Torvin, 40 years of service designing station life support systems. The Synthari in the corner is Communications Officer Prell, 3 children back on her homeworld." Park closed the display. 17 humans died getting to them. By any logical calculation, that's a bad trade. 17 trained soldiers for 38 mixed personnel, many of whom have no combat value. Then why do it? "Because combat value isn't the same as life value," Park said simply. "Scholar Riven isn't a soldier, but his translation work saves lives by helping us understand enemies. Engineer Torvin keeps stations functioning so thousands can live safely. Officer Prell deserves to see her children again." She met Riven's eyes directly. "And even if they had no value beyond being alive, we'd still go? Because leaving people to die is something humans can't do, not won't. Can't. It breaks something fundamental in us." The transport docked at Thessia 7 6 hours later. Captain Hayes met them at the airlock. He looked tired, older than 2 weeks ago. Leading a training facility while knowing his people were fighting and dying elsewhere extracted its own cost. "Debrief tomorrow morning," Hayes said. "For now, get some rest, real rest. Not duty rest." The 4 aliens returned to their barracks. The room felt different now, smaller, less significant. They had seen real combat, had watched humans make impossible choices. Training exercises seemed childish in comparison. That evening they met in the common area. All 4 needed to talk, to process what they had witnessed, to decide what came next. Torgun spoke first. I'm withdrawing, requesting immediate transfer home. Nobody seemed surprised. I came here to learn strength, the massive Hravik continued. My species values power, endurance, the ability to overcome physical challenges. I thought humans would teach advanced combat techniques, ways to use strength more effectively. He stood, moving to the window overlooking the training grounds. But humans don't fight with strength. They fight with sacrifice. Their entire tactical doctrine is built on trading themselves for objectives. That's not strength. That's something else. Something my people can't learn because we're not built to break ourselves that way. Plix nodded slowly. Engineering squad showed me humans who deliberately put themselves in danger to protect infrastructure. Not because the infrastructure was irreplaceable, because other people needed it. They calculate their lives as less valuable than abstract concepts like duty and protection. Standard infantry was the same, Teswin said. Humans who refused evacuation orders because wounded couldn't be moved. Logic said leave them, save the healthy soldiers, preserve combat effectiveness. Humans said no. Said everyone comes home or nobody does. They all looked at Rivan. He had been quiet since returning, processing everything he had witnessed with Scout Team 3. I watched Lieutenant Park and her team run into an ambush to retrieve Williams. Riven said finally, watch them risk 5 lives to save 1. The odds were terrible. The tactical situation was impossible. They should have retreated, called for support, followed proper protocols. He closed his eyes, seeing it again. The plasma fire. The desperate sprint. Williams being dragged across open ground while being shot at from multiple directions. But they didn't follow protocols. They went anyway. And Williams lived because 5 humans decided his life was worth risking their own. Riven opened his eyes. I don't understand how they make that choice. How they calculate 1 life is worth 5 risks. The math doesn't work. It's not math, Teswin said quietly. It's emotion. Humans don't calculate acceptable losses. They feel every potential loss as personal failure. Their bonding instincts override survival instincts. Torgun rumbled agreement. Earth made them that way. Made them bond so intensely that losing packmates feels like dying themselves. Made them willing to die to prevent that feeling. We can't learn that, Plix whispered. We're not damaged the right way. The 4 aliens sat in heavy silence. Outside, human trainees ran evening exercises, their voices carrying through the walls. Laughing, joking, carrying trauma they had learned to function through. The next morning, they met with Captain Hayes and Sergeant Okoye for formal debrief. The humans already knew what was coming. They had seen this scene play out with every alien group that completed observation phase. We're withdrawing from the program, Rivan said without preamble. All 4 of us. Effective immediately. Hayes nodded slowly. Can you tell me why? Because we can't learn what you're teaching, Rivan said. We came here thinking you would teach us tactics. Advanced military strategy. Ways to be more effective soldiers. But that's not what this program is. He gestured at the facility around them. You're teaching trauma. Teaching how to function while broken. Teaching decisions that prioritize others over self. Our species didn't evolve that way. We can't evolve that way. We're not built to break ourselves for abstract concepts like duty and sacrifice. Okoye leaned back in her chair. You're right. That's exactly what we're teaching. Not because we think everyone should be like us. Because the galaxy needs someone who fights like us. Why? Torgun demanded. Why does the galaxy need broken warriors? Because enemies don't follow rules, Hayes said. Because sometimes the only thing standing between civilians and death is someone willing to trade themselves. Because calculated logic and proper tactics aren't enough when facing opponents who don't care about casualties. He pulled up casualty statistics. Human units versus other coalition forces in equivalent situations. We die more often than any other species. Our casualty rates are 60% higher. By every logical measure, we're the worst soldiers in the galaxy. Then he showed mission success rates. Human units completed objectives 93% of the time. Other coalition forces averaged 58%. We die more, but we win more, Okoye said. Because we don't stop. Don't retreat. Don't calculate acceptable losses. We fight like every life matters, even while knowing we might not survive. That's insane, Plix said softly. Yes, Hayes agreed, it is. But it's also effective. And the coalition needs that effectiveness when protecting people who can't protect themselves. Rivan felt anger rising in his chest. You're using your own damage as a weapon. Systematizing trauma. making martyrs instead of soldiers. We're not making anything, Okoye said, and for the first time Riven heard real emotion in her voice. We were already made. Earth made us over millions of years. Human history made us over thousands of years. We didn't choose to be this way. We just are. She stood up, moved to the window. But we can choose what to do with what we are. We can be conquerors. Use our willingness to die as a tool for domination. Many human cultures did exactly that for most of our history. Or, Hayes continued, we can be protectors, use our damage to shield others, trade our lives for those who value survival over sacrifice. That's what the Coalition recruited us for. Not conquest, protection. 17 humans died at Forward Station 7, Riven said. 17 lives traded for 38 others. You call that protection. I call it tragedy. It's both, Okoye said quietly. It's always both. Every human who dies protecting others is a tragedy. But every person who lives because of that protection is a victory. We can't separate those things. Can't celebrate the saves without mourning the costs. She turned to face the 4 aliens. You're right to withdraw. You should withdraw. You don't have our damage, don't have our trauma. Learning to function like us would require breaking yourselves, and that's not something anyone should choose. Hayes pulled up documents on his display. I'm approving all 4 transfer requests. Your credentials will note successful completion of observation phase. That's not a failure marker. Many Coalition officers have completed observation and withdrawn. It's an honor, actually. Means you understood what you witnessed instead of just watching. The documents appeared on each alien's personal terminal. Official releases. Commendations for completing a difficult program. Transportation arrangements back to their homeworlds. I have one question before we go, Teswin said. Was it worth it? Those 17 humans at Forward Station 7. Was holding the station worth those lives? Okoye didn't hesitate. We didn't die for the station. We died for the 38. And yes, it was worth it. It's always worth it. Even knowing the cost? Especially knowing the cost, Hayes said. If we didn't understand what we were trading, the trade would be meaningless. We know exactly what each life is worth. That's why we're willing to pay the price. The 4 aliens left that afternoon. Transportation had already been arranged. Efficient as always. The humans were practiced at processing withdrawals. At the landing pad, Lieutenant Park came to see Riven off. Her arm had healed completely. Regeneration medicine working its usual miracles. Will you keep fighting? Riven asked. Knowing it will probably kill you eventually? Park smiled, and it was genuine. Not forced. Not hiding pain. Just honest warmth. I will. Because every time I fight, someone lives who might have died. That's worth whatever it costs me. I think humans are the saddest species in the galaxy, Rivan said softly. Maybe, Park agreed. But we're also the happiest. Because we get to save people, get to make differences, get to matter. That's worth being sad sometimes. The transport lifted off 90 minutes later. Riven watched Thessia 7 shrink in the viewport. Watched the training facility disappear. Watched the last 2 months of his life become memory. 6 months after returning to his homeworld, Riven heard news about border conflicts escalating, Coalition forces being pushed back, desperate situations requiring desperate responses. Human units requested permission to hold positions while other species evacuated. Permission was granted. The news reports came later. Human casualties, heavy losses, nearly 40% of the units that volunteered to stay behind, but 100% evacuation success for other species. Every non-human soldier and civilian extracted safely. Coalition declared it a victory, praised the tactical success, awarded medals to surviving humans and posthumous honors to those who fell. Riven watched the news with his family around him. Quilari, who had never experienced combat, never watched humans run toward certain death, never understood what protection actually costs. They're going to die, his sibling said, watching footage of human soldiers preparing for deployment. They know, Riven said quietly, echoing Teswin's words from months ago. They don't care. That's what makes them human. His sibling looked confused. Why would anyone fight like that? Riven thought about Lieutenant Park, about Sergeant Okoye, about Private Wells running toward 200 enemies, about 17 humans dying to save 38 others. Because someone has to, he said finally. And humans are the only species broken in exactly the right way to do it. The galaxy needed protectors, needed warriors who valued other lives more than their own. Needed beings willing to stand between civilians and danger, knowing they probably wouldn't survive. Earth had created those beings. Millions of years of extinction events and predation and survival against impossible odds. Humans had learned to bond intensely because isolation meant death. Learned to ignore pain because stopping meant dying. Learned to sacrifice because protecting the group was the only way individuals survived. And now impossibly, beautifully, tragically, they used that damage to protect others. Turned trauma into purpose. Made martyrdom into meaning. Riven never forgot his time at the training facility. Never forgot watching humans make impossible choices. Never forgot the sad, knowing eyes of warriors who carried costs nobody should have to carry. Years later, when his own government asked him to advise on military doctrine, he told them the truth. Humans don't fight better than us. They fight differently. They've learned to weaponize their own destruction. Turned self-sacrifice into tactical advantage. We can't learn that because we're not built that way. Our species values survival, values logic, values calculated risk. He paused, remembering plasma fire and desperate sprints and humans dragging wounded across open ground. But when you need someone to hold an impossible position, when you need soldiers who'll die before retreating, when you need warriors who consider acceptable losses a personal failure, you call humans. Because they're the only species that fights like every life matters more than their own. The galaxy was protected by broken warriors, by beings damaged enough to make impossible choices, by humans who had learned to turn their trauma into the ultimate gift, the gift of protection purchased with their own lives. And they called it duty, called it honor, called it Tuesday. Because for humans, trading themselves for others wasn't extraordinary. It was just what they did. What they had always done. What Earth had taught them to do through millions of years of trial and extinction, and desperate survival. The galaxy needed that, even if understanding it broke everyone who tried to learn it. Even if the only beings who could do it were the ones already broken in exactly the right ways.